Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here, and today we're going to be going through the most recent proposal for amendments to the US EV federal tax credit. There have been significant changes since the last time we talked about it. Again, just a proposal, but we'll go through the details on that. Then we've got some updates from Elon Musk on the status of the FSD Beta. For audio listeners, you may not have seen this, but I did get access to the beta, so I'll share some of my initial thoughts there too at the end of the episode. And then before that, we've also got some news on China and Berlin. Kind of a roller coaster day to start the week for Tesla stock, but it did end up finishing up 0.9% to $743 even. That compared to the NASDAQ down 0.1%. All right, so the topic we're starting with today is the current status of the US federal EV tax credit. I've gotten a lot of questions on this over the weekend, but on Friday, the House Ways and Means Committee released a markup of their proposed budget reconciliation bill. So this is the $3.5 trillion budget that Democrats largely hope to pass alongside the smaller and separate infrastructure bill. If there are changes to the US EV tax credit, the budget bill is what will carry those changes. I'm sure many of you by now have seen the headlines, but you all know I love to go through all the little details, so I have gotten all this from the source material. We're not going to go through that verbatim because it is kind of legalese, but I will put the link to that in the show notes. Basically, it starts on page 282 of this proposal, if you want to read through it yourself. Even though there may still be changes, I do think it's helpful to understand the current proposed structure. First of all, because there is still time to give feedback then to your representative, but then secondly, it should also give us some insight into where things might end up. All right, so here are the basics of this proposal. The base amount for a qualified electric vehicle would be a $4,000 refundable credit. There are a few items of qualification, but the primary ones are the battery size. So from 2022 through 2023, the battery must be 7 kilowatt hours or larger. And from 2024 through 2031, it must be at least 10 kilowatt hours or larger. The battery must be capable of charging via an external source of electricity. And initially, there is no requirement for that base credit for the vehicle to be made in the US. However, that does change after 2026, which at that point, earning even the base credit would require final assembly within the United States. So as many of you are probably putting together, this would mean a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle would be eligible for that base credit of $4,000. After that base credit, there are 3 potential additional credits. So one of them is a $3,500 credit if the battery capacity is above 40 kilowatt hours through 2026 or 50 kilowatt hours thereafter. Next is a $4,500 credit for what they are calling a domestic assembly qualification. However, that title is a little bit misleading. Essentially, this means unions. We'll talk more about that in a second. Then finally, in terms of the credits, there is a $500 credit for domestic content. Again, we'll talk more about that in a second. So adding all those up, $4,000, $3,500, $4,500, and $500, the maximum credit an EV could earn would be $12,500. But for Tesla, I think, and I'm not positive on this, but I think the max credit would be $8,000 because Tesla should qualify for that base, the $3,500 for the large battery, and then the domestic content, which is $500. My only uncertainty on that is the language of under this paragraph that is listed time and time again here. I don't know enough about legislative structure to know if that means that these must be met sequentially, which if that were the case, that would mean you have the base, then the bigger battery credit, then the domestic assembly, and then if you got all those, you could get domestic content. Or if they're just all taken individually and summed up. To me, it reads as the latter, the individual summation. That will be my assumption for the rest of the episode, but that obviously has a pretty big impact on how this is structured. So please, if you do happen to understand that better, let me know in the comments, and I'll make a pinned comment to clarify that if I can. Anyway, for the rest of the basics, this proposed credit would begin January 1st, 2022. It would expire December 31st, 2031. There is no cap per manufacturer. The credit is refundable, as I mentioned. So it can be redeemed even if you don't have that much tax liability, and it may not be retroactive. We had previously seen a proposal that did have a retroactive date, but as far as I can tell, and it's possible that I'm missing something, these things you have to kind of piece together a lot of different documents sometimes, but as far as I can tell, there is no retroaction in this one. All right, so let's talk about that domestic assembly qualification. They define this as saying, quote, "The term domestic assembly qualification means with respect to any new qualified plug-in electric vehicle, that the final assembly of such vehicle occurs at a plant, factory, or other place which is operating under a collective bargaining agreement negotiated by an employee organization," end quote. So long and short of it there, $4,500 credit for union made. We had previously seen that be a $2,500 proposal and a $2,500 credit for US made. But in this proposal, we're seeing now a $4,500 credit versus those two combining for $5,000 before, and there's the union made stipulation. This doesn't specifically say US made, but it says domestic assembly qualification. So I assume that somewhere in the subtext there, it does require US made. Otherwise, the name of that credit would make no sense. So I don't think the Ford Mustang Mach-E, for example, because it is made in Mexico, would qualify for that credit. I can't guarantee that, but that is my intuition here, and that has been subject of some debate over the weekend. Personally, I am very disappointed with this portion of the proposal, but let's get through the rest of it and then I will share my overall thoughts. So we've got that domestic assembly credit, then there's the domestic content credit for $500. That requires 50% plus domestic components and batteries manufactured in the US. So Tesla should be good on both those accounts, at least on the 3 and the Y. I don't think the S and X batteries would qualify there, but turns out that doesn't matter anyway because overall on any of these credits, there is a price cap. So that breaks down for sedans, $55,000, vans, $64,000, SUVs, $69,000, and then pickup trucks, $74,000. So this is actually a positive change from what we had previously seen proposed. We had seen price caps of $60,000 and then that had lowered down to $40,000. Now it looks like that's back up a little bit and also staggered by class, which I think is a good way to approach it. And while I think it's stupid to just have a price cap and not have it phase out, I think that makes it really tricky for automakers to determine their pricing. I do at least think the caps are much more reasonable than the previous proposals. In addition to a price cap for the vehicles, there is also an income limit for the purchaser. They have to have a modified adjusted gross income for the immediately preceding year of below $800,000 for joint return, below $600,000 for head of household, and below $400,000 for individual filers. This portion does actually have a bit of a phase out, which almost makes it more frustrating because obviously they understand how to do it. But the credit would be reduced by $200 for every additional $1,000 in income above each of those respective caps. So an $8,000 credit for a Tesla, for example, would phase out completely after an additional $40,000 of income. The max $12,500 credit would phase out completely after an additional $62,500 of income. So those are all the details of the proposal for new EVs. There is also a proposal for a used EV tax credit. For qualified EVs sold below $25,000, the credit cannot exceed 30% of the sale price. The income limits are $150,000, $112,500, and $75,000 respectively. The credit would be between $1,250 and $2,500 for EVs with a battery of 4 kilowatt hours or more. Max credit would kick in at 10 kilowatt hours or more. Finally, that used EV credit would have the same post-2031 expiration date. All right, so that is the overall structure. There are some good elements of this, but I think this is one of the worst proposals that we have seen so far. Let me make this comparison to explain why I feel that way, and this is predicated on my understanding being correct that the individual pieces are not required to happen in sequence. Again, we'll try to get clarification on that, but if that understanding is correct, you could have a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle with a 7 kilowatt hour battery made in the US earning a credit of $9,000. That would be the base $4,000 credit, the $4,500 union-made credit, and the $500 domestic content credit. That type of plug-in hybrid would probably have a range of about 25 electric miles, and that would get a larger tax credit than a 300-mile Tesla. Now, I've explained my disdain for plug-in hybrids before. They're inefficient, they are a half measure, they reduce investment in the actual powertrain of the future that needs to be developed, and their emissions can be a lot more significant than what testing would imply, especially if they're not plugged in, which a small battery plug-in hybrid is going to be plugged in naturally a lot less than a full EV, which obviously requires it. The fact that these vehicles that might have, $700 worth of batteries in them, $1,000 worth of batteries in them, might be eligible for a $9,000 credit from the US government is appalling. Even if I'm wrong on the number and it's $4,000, that's still unjustifiably high in my opinion. This follows the administration's target of 40 to 50% electrified vehicles by 2030, which includes plug-in hybrids. It seems like the US is just kind of going all in on plug-in hybrids. More than anything else, to me, that is just sad. As an American, frankly, it sucks to see. We've got Tesla right here, right in the US, right at home, figuring this out, figuring out an actual sustainable solution for the future, and we just ignore them. We can't even say their name. It's disgusting. I get it, it's politics, but that doesn't make it any less disappointing. And I started that off talking about plug-in hybrids. That wasn't even about the union carve-out necessarily, but those two in combination, it's such an explicit bailout for companies that have already been bailed out before. Why are we so insistent on supporting companies that are failing and not supporting companies that are succeeding? It makes no sense. Protect the workers, protect the people if you need to, but do not protect those failing companies. That is not a path forward. So overall, it's just super frustrating, and it has nothing to do with whether or not Tesla will be successful because of this structure. Tesla will crush it under this structure, absolutely obliterate things. An $8,000 credit through 2031 with no cap per manufacturer. $4,500 disadvantage doesn't matter. Tesla's been working with a $7,500 disadvantage anyway, so this closes that gap while also adding an $8,000 credit to Tesla. Yeah, I think they'll do just fine. That supposition, though, doesn't justify stacking the deck against Tesla. Anyway, we'll see where this goes. They have woefully under budgeted for this thing. They expect this tax credit to cost them $15.5 billion from 2022 to 2031. If we assume, for sake of ease, $10,000 per vehicle, that would only be forecasting 1.5 million vehicles or so to get the credit. Now, not all of Tesla's production gets sold in the United States, but even if we assume half of it, Tesla would eat that up in what, 2 years, 3 years? I feel like I've got to be missing something here because it makes no sense. Anyway, we'll see where this goes. Again, this probably will change to some extent. Joe Manchin, senator from West Virginia, is already out saying that he's not going to support this level of spending in this bill. Yes, posturing, I'm sure, but it's not like everyone is just ready to go and sign this thing right now. Toyota and Honda have also come out and criticized this structure. First time in a while that I've agreed with Toyota, but they said in a statement that they are against the plan because it discriminates, quote, against American auto workers based on their choice not to unionize, end quote. Honda echoed those comments as well and called the bill unfair. So obviously we focus on Tesla, but it's not like Tesla is the only automaker that's not a part of the UAW. So we'll see where it goes. We should see some more news on this over the next 2 weeks. All right, we spent too much time on that, but let's move on here to a few tweets from Elon Musk. First up, this one got a lot of attention on Friday. Elon replying to a Holmar's tweet about Tesla's valuation, saying, quote, to be fair, investors are giving us significant credit for achieving self-driving, given that Tesla's valuation/production is very high compared to other automakers, end quote. I think it's pretty clear that Tesla does get a little bit of credit here. I don't know that I would call it significant. Obviously, that's a little bit arbitrary, but I certainly don't think that Tesla needs to achieve full autonomy to eventually grow into the valuation they have, because Tesla is doing such a good job of actually generating profits and operating leverage off of their current business. Sure, it is a fact that Tesla's valuation divided by their vehicle production is much higher than other automakers, but Tesla is able to extract a lot more value than other automakers too, so it should be. So nothing in that comment from Elon causes me any concern. Next, then, a couple of updates on the FSD Beta. So Elon did confirm that in FSD Beta 10, it's not yet a merged stack between highway and city streets. They're still separate, but they're hoping for single stack in version 10.1. I do think that makes it less likely for much of a wider expansion for 10.1. But in terms of timeline, Elon did respond to a question asking about when waypoints and 10.1 might be coming, and he said 3 weeks. So I don't know if that means waypoints or 10.1 or both, but that's what we've got for now. Next, we've got a quick update on pricing. Jay in Shanghai passing this along. Tesla has raised the price on the performance variant of the Model Y in China by 10,000 RMB, or about $1,500 US. While Tesla has been taking orders for the performance Model Y, I don't think they've actually started any production or deliveries there yet. They say deliveries are expected to start in Q4. Next then is a bit of news on Berlin. So unfortunately this is from a Seeking Alpha article citing a Bloomberg report, which my guess was on Bloomberg Terminal. I didn't see an actual article about it, but the Seeking Alpha article says that Tesla has landed preliminary approvals for several water basins as well as changes to the plant's external structure. So relatively minor there, but good to see. Perhaps more interestingly, we got a report out of Germany here that Jörg Steinbach, economic minister there in Brandenburg, is saying that he believes the probability is at 95% for Tesla to receive final approval for Giga Berlin. The question really is what time. I think we all realize that opening is inevitable. I'd certainly put the odds at higher than 95%, but the question really is when. Steinbach also did say that sometimes Tesla has a lack of empathy and wishes that they would more seriously consider the concerns of the greater population. I'm sure on Tesla's side, conversely, they would wish for more consideration of urgency. All right, so we do have to actually wrap it up here. I do want to make sure this gets out at a reasonable time tonight, and the EV credit stuff took a little bit longer than I'd hoped. So I know I said we'd talk a little bit more about the beta. Didn't mean to mislead on that at all. We will talk about that tomorrow. But just the really quick last thing here. If you are following the Inspiration4 mission from SpaceX, it looks like they are targeting a launch on Wednesday, September 15th at 8:02 p.m. Eastern Time for that mission. So keep an eye out for that, but that'll wrap it up for today. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you're subscribed and signed up for notifications. You can also find me on Twitter at Tesla Podcast, and I'll see you tomorrow for the Tuesday, September 14th episode of Tesla Daily. Thank you.